Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome cinematographer Lorenzo Levrini, who joins us to talk about their work on Wasteman. Lorenzo will talk us through the creative decisions made to create the look of the film. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Lorenzo. Hi, Lorenzo. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey Rob, super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're here to talk about Wasteman, which has come out recently in cinemas in America. I think it's hit VOD as well in the UK in the past month. Yeah, I'm really excited to sit down and talk to you about the film, mainly because it's sat with me now for the past number of days. I can't
Where
stop
did you see
thinking about
it?
it.
Did you see it? Did you see it in the cinema?
I know I had the VOD
Fair.
VOD link, so yeah, not the same when you're watching it at home, but it's still, at least you can still watch it and enjoy it. I would have liked to see it on a big screen, just because of
Sure.
like your work, but then also the sound and the sort of what's the word, like rawness of it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we jump into the project, how have you found the reception to the film itself?
Yeah, I've honestly been blown away. I mean, you never know with low budget features whether they'll find an audience, So to have this many eyeballs on it, and especially, so many people got to see it on the big screen, so many people messaging me, connecting to it. It's honestly exceeded every expectation that I might have had. But I'll tell you what the best bit was, which we had this charity called Switchback who work with ex-inmates to help them get out of the justice system and sort of rebuild their life. And through Switchback, we had lots of like young ex-inmates participate as supporting cast or just sharing their experiences in a consultant type of role. And after the release of the film, Amy, the communications manager at Switchback, got in touch with me to say, the men who were involved are incredibly proud of the film, and that being able to recognize their own experiences without feeling talked down to or stereotyped was huge for them. And she also said that Switchback took a new group of young men who hadn't been involved in the film to see it, and they said it was incredibly accurate and true to their experience of prison. And these are not men who would like sugarcoat their opinion. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't shy away from saying what they thought. So for me, hearing that was the best bit, because you want to do right by these young men and you don't want to feel you've like exploited, glamorized, or misrepresented their experience. So for however small an impact what we do as filmmakers has on society, you want it to be a positive one. So hearing that was like the best bit for me. Sure.
Because it's a prison film and it's probably so easy to sort of glamorize that life and the different tiers that you have in prison of people and what they're doing. And yeah, I think as well, like it's probably important that it's not glamorized, and having people sort of see it and relate to it's probably helped a lot to think that you've done right with the story, but also
Totally.
what people experience, because it is like people can watch it and be like, yeah, that was my life for X amount of time.
Yeah.
But which is, again, is just, yeah, what it's just, yeah, amazing. But even to get that feedback as well from a charity, it probably helps them out as well to have something like that to say, like, if you do want to help out, there's opportunities there, and things can pop up as well.
Mm-hmm.
But how did the project come about, and what made you want to take it on?
It came about through Sophia Gibber, the producer. I had met her through, because I work in Rome as well. I'm Italian. I've done a few films in Rome, and she lives in Rome. And we met through the Italian film scene. And when I heard that this project was going ahead, I kind of figured out that she might be involved. So I messaged her and I was like, "Are you involved in this?" She was like, "Yeah, I'm the producer." And I was like, "Whoa, please let me read it," So she sent it to me to read, and I just felt it was like really made for me, just like because I've done a lot of work on the more art house end of things, but I've also done a lot of like action and like more kind of stuff in that wheelhouse. And I felt that this project kind of brought the two together. So I was like, this is tailor made for me. This is perfect for me. I really want to do it. And so then I met Cal, the director, and we clicked, and rest is history, I guess.
It's always funny how like people, you might know someone and then just on the whim ask them, are you working on this? And it's like, actually I am. And it's like,
small world. Yeah,
chance. Yeah, it's like, this is my moment. And yeah, I find those sort of moments as well just funny, because sometimes, even though it's important to make connections, but it's making those human connections that somebody will sort of take you on and still remember you, and you're not sort of coming out with your hat, cap in hand, being like, I need a job.
absolutely.
But to the film's look and style, it's reading as well that shot over 3 weeks, which is pretty short for a film. But then also considering it is pretty much in one location and different prison cells and corridors. How did you go about thinking about shooting and using the space? Because I think we've seen prison portrayed in many different ways. We've seen probably the most famous, probably Prison Break. But how did you want to sort of differentiate from other shows like that?
So I think the brief started with Cal had done this short film years before called Bossman, which was all on a one take on a phone in a prison, and he had been inspired to do that in turn by seeing these real prison videos filmed on phones that would kind of get uploaded and then deleted. And I think it's important to remember that, like, as society becomes very smartphone driven, it's like the prison world is a microcosm of the outside world. It's not insulated from that completely, right? So those things start to play out in prison as well, in terms of like people showing their life online and stuff. And so he thought that was really interesting and kind of not really seen much in prison dramas to date. And so he did a lot of research on that. He did that short film, and he wanted to bring that kind of mobile phone aesthetic to Wasteman as well. And then for the non-phone stuff, the kind of conventional camera stuff, he was very clear from the outset that he wanted this kind of very gritty, raw kind of handheld style. So that was there from the offset, I guess. And so we just used those two anchors of the phone and of the very kind of visceral handheld kind of camera as a starting point, and we just kind of built out from there. But so just as a question to you, did you figure out if there was any studio work, or what did you think any of it was shot in a studio? What was your perception of it?
I think I've shot in a prison before, so I know the sort of feel and aesthetics, because there's certain things I don't think you can replicate just because of the size, and especially with a film with budget probably not so large. Mm-hmm. I reckon the cells were in a studio.
Yeah, they were.
And then everything outside the cells is on location, because the size. And then
that's right.
But by being in the cell, you can do what you have so much more free reign to do what you want, and know how to use the space and cheat things.
Yeah, you got it.
Yes. But just going back to the sort of style, like the idea of mobile phones, because even though you're mentioning people are incarcerated, like they still are going to be involved in what's happening in like the real world, and we kind of see how technology helps them a lot. One with the phones, the smartphones, like, but then also the use of drones as well, bringing in contraband, and it's like stuff like that. So there's kind of like people becoming a little bit more savvy in what's happening, and in a way getting their message out as well. So like when you do see it's like halfway point of the film where Tom Blythe's character is jumped in the cell. D is jumped in the cell, and they're recording it to sort of show this is what happens if you mess with us. And then also the fact that you had Taylor, David Johnson's character, sort of get involved and have to slap him about as well to show that whoever's involved, we will make you do things as well. And it creates like so much more harsher environment as well, that it feels quite real, and that like it doesn't hold back any punches as well.
Yeah, they did do that. Like we watched. Cal showed me lots of references in which there are beatings, caught on camera, and I guess that was the midpoint fight, but also the fight that you see at the beginning. That's all shot on mobile phone, which Cal shot. In this case, he did it all himself, and yeah, so that was based on some real phone videos we saw of like people documenting these beatings, I guess. So that's very much inspired by real footage.
I think as well, like that must be a weird way of doing your research, is like looking at this footage, because it's not, even though you're creating fiction, you're watching real life, and it must be sort of a bit hard on your psyche to sort of see like someone just get beaten up. It's like, how do you pull yourself away from that to sort of say this is what I want in my film, but then also it's like scary real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Switchback, the charity we mentioned before, they were very involved in like telling us stories, consulting. I mean, I think they were involved at every stage, but I remember one meeting I went to in person at their headquarters in London, and there was like maybe 15 to 20 ex-inmates in the room, and we were all in a circle. David Johnson was there, Cal was there, and we were like, Sophia was there, and we were just hearing their stories, and slowly kind of hearing that kind of puts you in the in that state of mind. And before I forget, I also wanted to shout out. There's a lot of second unit with the phone. Like all the stuff that's not strictly fighting, but like the guy swallowing the mini phone, or like all that phone kind of texture stuff. A lot of it was shot by Sam Taylor on kind of like a second unit. So he would go off with supporting cast, or some of these ex-inmates through Switchback, and they would just do a load of stuff, create these worlds, the tumble dryer, all of that stuff, and which then kind of made its way into the film. And I think that was so important for kind of adding that texture, and that stuff was very inspired by all these stories, that we heard.
Yeah, even like stuff like that where you shouldn't laugh, but it's because stuff like when they go into the tumble dryer, but it feels like you kind of capture like people's friendships or just the day-to-day boredom of people. And yeah, if you have a chance to go into one of those tumble dryers, why wouldn't you? It'd be quite funny. But then I think after 30 seconds, it'd be like, I need to get out.
But of course you laugh, because it's not just because you're. I mean, this is one of the big things that I realized at the beginning, like working with Switchback. It's not just because you're in prison, like everything's grim all the time. That's not how human beings work. This is an idea that I was keen to kind of put through the lighting, and it's like the full range, the full gamut of human emotions exist in here. So just like in kind of anyone's life, you've got the sadness, the happiness, you've got the full range of human emotions. So yeah, it's absolutely important to show that it's not like it's all grim. It's really important to show there's those moments of like fun and kind of ecstasy and joy and kind of camaraderie, as well as the lows. I thought that was really important.
You do see, again, you see it, and you kind of, it builds that whole world around, and the characters live in it as well, and makes it more real. What I'm curious to know about as well is like when a lot of the shots are very tight. We do focus on like the characters' expressions and looks and feelings. As a cinematographer, like how do you consider these shots? Because you're working in a tight area. Characters are sort of emoting, very raw in their performance. How do you go about making sure that the camera doesn't get in the way of what they're trying to do?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I think it did get in the way a lot of the time. I think that was part of the ethos. Like so we had the option of building the cells slightly bigger, but Carl and I think were adamant that they be built life size. And then I kept saying this, and then the construction manager Phil came up to me and said, "Oh, we did build them like 2% bigger." So I was like, "Okay, fine, 2% bigger," but like we could have made them 25% bigger, and we didn't. We wanted that kind of claustrophobic feeling. I think that was really important. And I think I remember with Carl, when we were speaking at the beginning, we said, look, if the camera bumps someone, or like someone bumps the camera out of the way, that's fine. That's part of the aesthetic. And that didn't really end up happening. I mean, you've got some small artifacts, like in that midpoint fight you mentioned. There's probably, I mean, I see it, probably no one else sees it. There's a filter artifact of like the filter getting the light and picking it back. I'm sure no one sees that, but like stuff like that. But I think that it was very much so that I had to be in tune with David and Tom in the cell, and feel what they were doing, and occasionally I would get in the way. I mean, once I stepped on Tom's foot, that was funny, but but it was like, you've got to imagine it's like them two, then me with the camera, and then the boom operator. Tom was in there as well, and there was no provision for any wild walls. So it was like, at some point, it's like, are we going to take the ceiling off the boom? But the ceiling couldn't come off; it was always on. So it's like the boom operator was like climbing on the bed and like trying to, and then some fight scenes. You've got Alex and Corin in there as well. So it's like a 4-man fight scene. It's quite hectic, and so yeah, I think it's just feeling it. But Cal and I fortified ourselves with some sort of soft prep. It's like a week of just before the start of formal prep. Actually, before we even got the full green light, we just remotely went on and did hours and hours of like read through, talking, and kind of making sure that I really understood what he wanted in each scene, and that gave me the kind of the basis to then be in the moment and react to what was going on. And the studio build had these kind of, you went outside and it was like a corridor, so it was kind of, it wasn't always easy to like get to Carl at the monitor, so it was like sometimes we would do it a bit and then go and talk, but then sometimes we were just in it for a while and then we'd go out, if that makes sense. I think that was interesting.
I think as well that allows you guys to discuss more beforehand and probably improvise a little bit as well, with what you sort of want to do, and as long as you sort of capture the meats and potatoes of the scene, but then you can sort of react to what the character's doing, but not necessarily move the camera, if that makes sense. So like if they stood up, you wouldn't stand up with them. You maybe give it an extra moment to then follow them, as an example.
It depends. Yeah, I think absolutely, you're right about being reactive and instinctual. And I think on we were in such a tight schedule that you sort of have to be. It's not the kind of shoot where you can be like, okay, everyone, we're doing this shot, which is a close up of D. It just doesn't work like that, But I think when you're doing stuff like that, it's really important to have that prep with the director, so you understand. I mean, a big theme in Wasteman was how to build tension. Obviously, that's really important. So to track where the tension has to be at each point of the story, and because you obviously, as you know, we shoot out a sequence, so it's like, tracking carefully where we are in the story, where the tension has to be, what cinematic tools we're going to use to build that tension, and tracking that in your head, and then filtering that through the instinct of being in the moment with the actors. That's a huge part of my job, on something like this.
And I think as well, going back to the point about the cell being 2% bigger, I think it would be slightly too obvious as a visual standpoint if you made it too big to then be like,
I think it would be, yeah. It wouldn't feel, it needed to feel claustrophobic,
Yeah, not like look at me, I'm in the big, in my cell, but I'm just lost, even in the bigger size and whatnot. But I do like that. You see the whites of their eyes, you see what's going on, and it's just, yeah, there's so much going on. And as actors as well, there's so much you can tell from just their eyes and how they're feeling and when they want to look away and what they decide. As I said, it stuck with me, and it's made me think a lot about certain decisions that are made in the film as well, because I feel like Taylor's definitely in on, I feel like Taylor's definitely in on it, on what's happening, what's going to happen
What
to
do you
Dee.
mean?
So how he explains to Dee that he's on a manslaughter charge because he mixed up. The
Yes.
drugs were a little bit too potent for people. But I feel like Taylor actually did mean to do that for someone by basically, doing the drugs. And that's why it kind of leads to that D part. That's why he kind of can get away with, as in subconsciously, he can drug D and not feel as bad doing it. I guess he goes after the lesser of two evils and kind of can play it off as a drug overdose rather than trying to kill Gaz and Paul instead.
Well, it's the only way, I guess, is the only way he's going to get away. Is the only way he's going to get out, isn't it? Otherwise, if he does Gaz and Paul, then he'll have to stay in.
Yeah, exactly, and he will never leave. Because you're talking about it being a set build and also location work, how do you think about continuity in those moments? Because as a construction manager and set decorating and production design, they would have looked at location and tried to copy as much as they can, and with color schemes and sort of look and feel of it all. But when you're shooting from set to location, how do you think about continuity in terms of lighting, maybe the way the camera is going to move, or the way that even the geography of both work?
Yes, big topic. I mean, first of all, it's worth exploring that the decisions in that build, because it's not as straightforward as you might think. Because first of all, we had to shoot the studio. We knew we had to shoot the studio before the real prison. So you have to go and visit the real prison a couple of times, and you have to really understand where you're placing the geography, so that you don't. Because then the first thing you're going to shoot is the studio, and people are going to come in cells, out of cells. You're going to make sure everyone's going the right way, looking in the right place. It's a bit of a nightmare. So we had to go to the prison, with the whole team, Cal and our amazing production designer Phoebe Plattman, and we would sort of map out different hypotheses of like, okay, I feel like their cells on the first floor and kind of in the middle, and then Gaz and Paul are obviously up there at an angle, so you're looking up and 45-degree left or something, and then you kind of map it all out, and you're kind of, okay, that makes sense. But then, because you're going to obviously see into that hero cell, Taylor and D cell, you have to make sure that that's the right one. And so I still remember it was cell number 4, and the cells were all different colors actually. So you watch the movie and you take it for granted that you got kind of that teal aquamarine color, but that's all over the film. But actually that was a decision, because every cell was different. It's like, well, do we want a white cell? And you think about it, that would have been a completely different film, So with Phoebe, with Cal, we kind of like, we kind of decided that this kind of more aquamarine color would be really interesting for the film, and it would kind of elevate it and give this kind of fish tank effect, like somehow underwater, or somehow take it away from the palette of just your gritty monochromatic prison film, which is great, but I feel we've seen it before, and so that was the first thing, that choice of that cell color was very much a choice, and then to your point, once we had selected that and selected the cell and kind of copied it in a studio, my job, together with Cal, together with our script supervisor, Julia, big job was like, tracking everyone's movements. And maybe the biggest example of that, the most complex for me, was this sequence at the climax where he is forcing Taylor to go up to the Manx cell and stab them, basically. And they have the conversation in their cell, which is the studio. Then he leaves, and then he walks up there, which is on location, and then he goes into the cell and that studio, and then he comes out to get some air, looks down at D. That's all location. But then we did one shot of D looking up and going back in the studio. So like I had to match the same shot of D standing right outside his cell, the type being in the studio, the wide being on location. So it was like a huge thing of like, and you've got to do D's look before you've done the location. So you're like, yes, you have to look exactly there. Do you know what I mean? So it's a whole thing. And so that one is probably the most complex sequence in terms of like tracking. And then he comes, and then he goes out, and we're back on location. He walks around, has this quick chat with the guard, and then he goes back in and has the fight, and that's obviously studio again. So there's, yes, the continuity of all the movements and the gaze, but there's also the continuity of lighting, which it's a big decision for me because we wanted it to be like darker, but originally it was meant to be at night in the script. But this wing has massive skylights, and we couldn't afford to be there during the night, and we couldn't afford to black them out. So it's like, okay, it's going to have to be evening. Like, it can't be night, you know, because we could have done night in the studio, but not on the wing. So it's like, okay, then we tried to do an evening, and then, but again, you've got to do that on the studio before you get to the location, right? So you've got to do your best guess of what you're going to get away with on location. You've got to do that on the studio, and then you've got to location and backwards match it, you know. In this case, our wonderful gaffer, Vinny Curtis, you know, he had a system of nets and silks that, you know, were on ropes, you know, and so they pulled, you know, nets and silks and various layers of kind of textile over the whole skylight. And then we put in whatever lights you see, the little bulkhead lights. That's something we put in because the actual wing had tubes, which I didn't like. I preferred bulkheads, so we put in bulkheads and had to match the color. So yeah, it was a whole thing. It was a big part of the job as well.
So there's a lot to take from your answer, and I think the first bit, and it's really interesting because it feels like it's like a massive juggling act and spinning plates of what you're doing. And also it's probably just the blocking of the scene of, like, if you're on a set, they've turned right, so when he went on location, he needs to make sure he goes right because it won't match in the edits. So you're kind of in your, you know, as continuity director, probably thinking about the editing side and how it's going to match later on. Then also you made a point about the colors and the color of the blue that's used in the film, which really does make it really distinct. It gives, like, with the natural light, a nice cold feeling of where they are, and not necessarily, even though like gray can have that, I feel like gray on screen is not the same feeling you get as gray in person. And I feel like as well, like, gray only works when it's winter time, whilst here you have so much sort of natural light, or natural light being emulated as well. I don't think it would give that same vibe, but that blue just gave it like very harsh, maybe like it's like an ocean blue as well, that like in
Yeah.
you're stuck deep somewhere dark in the ocean.
Yeah, I would have given you, I think, gray or something in that scheme would have given you, you know, like a more of a monochromatic film, you know, which is a completely different proposition, you know.
Yeah, I think because of like my experience of grey is like Eastern European grey. So when you're like, I've been to sort of like Poland in the winter, and you see the snow like reflecting the grey, and it kind of adds to it. And you're just like, wow, that's really dreary. But I guess when you have something with a bit more sun, it's not the same. And then also the fact that their costumes are going to be grey. So then will they not get slightly washed out with the production design? But that's also a conversation that would have as well amongst themselves.
Well, we all had the conversation together, you know, and obviously the blue of the shirt speaks to the blue, you know, and, you know, our costume designer Lauren was kind of involved with, you know, that shade of blue against the location, and we did a camera test where we basically the art department painted different boards for us, different bits of wood with all the different colors we'd have in the cell, on the door, the green of the door, the color of the corridor and stuff. And then Lauren provided the kind of costumes, and we had a supporting actor there at my camera test with all that, and then we did a LUT test. And so we kind of we really thought about how all those shades would go together, you know. But, you know, just thinking about that monochrome, I think we watched A Prophet a lot. I don't know if you know it, the French film.
So good.
Yeah, and so that's a big kind of example of like a slightly more monochromatic. I mean, it's not monochromatic in the lighting or the grading, you know. There's but that's more of it in terms of the prison cells themselves. There's much more gray tones in the production design. So it's kind of like that did that really well, but we didn't want to do the same thing, you know. We wanted something slightly different.
Yeah, again, like, it's probably quite easy to copy another film with their colors and whatnot, and have like a preconceived notion of how prisons could look and how they could feel. But then some prisons are so big that each wing might be a slightly different color or just different feel to it all.
Yeah. Well, different cells on the wing. I can't remember the name, whether it was C wing, Captain Mallet that we used, but we visited different wings, and that was the wing that we chose. And even in that wing, there's lots of different cell colors. Some were just white, some were just cream, some were that teal, some were more green. So it was an active choice for sure.
Even when you look at, like, I'm looking at a picture of A wing at the moment, and it has a horrible like snotty green color.
In Captain Mallet,
Yes, in
yeah.
yeah, in A wing, and it's just all horrible. So I think that blue actually makes it look a lot nicer.
Yes. Although what you're seeing on the snotty green of the wing, that might have been our color. So I've got to
Oh.
shout out. I've got to shout out Jax Harney, our wonderful kind of colorist as well. And she was involved from the beginning. So like whatever colors were really present in the corridor of the real wing, we couldn't change. So those were kind of sampled and replicated in our camera test. And then we worked with Jax to make sure that all the colors in the prison were kind of rendered
How
correctly.
does it, because you have got a color in mind whilst you're shooting, what are your discussions like with the colorists when you're talking about color in a film like this? Because they do pop in a certain way, but are these conversations that happen very early on, or do you just give like a fold of like, this is what we're going to sort of plan to do?
Well, I don't know if you've spoken to other DPs about this, but like I think a lot of DPs work this way now, where you don't leave that conversation to afterwards. You basically create what's called a LUT beforehand. So that camera test that I spoke about, that footage goes to Jax before the shoot, and then I go in for a half day or a day, and we work on the look, and then that look comes to set. So it's not something that I would leave till afterwards. So that the way that specific colors, and I've done this for like many films now, and to be honest, most DPs do the same now when they're working on a feature film or a TV show. They work with the colorist to on the basis of some camera tests, and it's important that the camera test be in a meaningful location with some meaningful colors. Otherwise, you've got nothing to work with. But you take the camera test in and you kind of grade it to create a general look that kind of, it at least puts the colors roughly where you need them, so that on set you're not playing guessing games. For me, it's impossible to work like that. You can't go on set and be like, oh, I wonder if this color will grade up all right. It's just you need to have you need the camera to show you like things correctly. Like you need the color and rendition in the camera to be correct for your taste and to the requirements of this film. So yeah, we shot that test, and obviously ahead of the test, you've got to prepare the swatches, paint the boards, get the costumes, bring all that to the test, shoot the test, take that to the colorist, and then create this kind of look file to have available on set. So it's a whole process, but it's really important, and it's kind of not fundamental for me these days.
I think sometimes I kind of skip over the color grade side of things because it's sometimes it just slips my mind when I'm asking questions. So
Yeah,
because you brought it up, I was like, okay, this is perfect time to sort of segue into it. And again, because people will see what you capture, but then also the color grade is quite important for them, people to actually understand colors and to see what you've been captured, or even to, like, depending on the show, like a hyper realization of the world, and to sort of play around with what's being presented in just the colors themselves.
yeah, absolutely. But I think what I would emphasize within that is the importance of doing that up front, because if you put yourself in the mindset of being on set and having to constantly guess what colors will be like, shooting on that wing and being like, oh, that green is going to be a different shade of green in the grade, and then you put actors there and like, okay, if they've all got gray hoodies, it's easier. But imagine if everyone's got colored clothes and you're trying to imagine what each color, it's just impossible. So it's really important that you decide how the colors should be rendered. And obviously you get to the grade, you can change it, you can evolve it, you can throw it away. But it's really important to me, and to be honest, I think most DPs working today, that the color response of the camera that's seen on set is accurate to what you want to see, you know, so that then you can actually look at the monitor with the director and actually be discerning and be like, does this specific element, this costume, is it right, or should we change it? Because if you don't have that, then you're like, oh well, I don't really know, we'll just have to see in the grade, and then it takes away decision making power from the set, which obviously I don't like. So yeah, that's why we do that.
And you're probably leaving a lot more up to chance as well, where, you know, if you've worked on something and you've done it and then it comes back and you just think that's not what we would have thought of when we shot, do we shoot it again? Are we able to shoot it again? Probably not. Who knows?
No. No.
But then again, like, as like audience members, because we see it as art, you kind of forget the science behind it a little bit as well, which kind of blows my mind as well, because you wouldn't think of art and science going hand in hand, but that, you know, they do.
Well, that's cinematography. It's the intersection of art and science, you know. I mean, the reason behind the choices that you make is artistic, because why should, you know, why should the prison cell be blue and not red? You know, you can't explain it in a rational scientific way. It's an emotional thing, it's an artistic thing, you know. But then the organizational process that you have to get through, and the technical process that you have to get through to get that implementation right, is the technical side. And that's what I love about cinematography, that it sits on that intersection of art and science. The art has to drive, you know, the artist has to be in the driver's seat, but the technical side, the scientist has to be there to execute what the artist wants.
I just feel like it's like I can imagine it's like an angel and devil on your shoulder being like, no, the science, no, the art. What is it that you feel?
Yeah.
Just, I've got two more questions. For my penultimate question, what was your favorite scene to shoot?
Oh my God. I don't know, but okay. I'll give you a favorite shot. There was just, I mean, I think this was Carl's idea, because he had done a commercial which used a similar technique, which is to zoom into something and then focus pull into something behind that. He actually did, I think it's worth seeing, like he did this commercial in COVID where someone's like washing their hand. You're looking through someone's window at night. They're washing their hands in a very kind of conventional kind of COVID way, washing their hands very carefully. And then there's something in the background, but you're zooming in and then you rack focus, and there's like a woman's legs on the floor as if she's just been beat up. And it was about domestic violence going up in COVID. And that was such a powerful shot, because she's always in the background, but you don't see it until you kind of pull focus. And he decided to do that for the moment that Dee is vomiting in the toilet and clocks the food. I mean, hashtag spoiler, but I guess people have seen the film, but you know, so he clocks the food, and we wanted to do the same thing. So we cut a hole. We had like a camera trap. So where, you know, where earlier in the story where he has his drug stash, that next to the toilet, that became a hole which we would put the camera in, and we kind of like, we would zoom, Dee's kind of vomiting, we zoom on him, then his face lifts and you can see him thinking, what the fuck is going on? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can swear. Yeah, you can swear. It's
well,
okay.
you know, what the fuck is going on? You can see him working it out, and then you see the moment where he works it out, and we're constantly zooming, and then he turns and we pull focus to the food, which is right there, you know. And then obviously we had to, like, where they were eating and stuff, we had to back plan it that we're eating in the right spot so that they leave the food there. But I just love that shot. It always gives me the goosebumps. And what I love the most about it is how Tom understood the shot and performed into it. Like, you can really see him thinking, what's going on? What did he do to me? How did he do this? And then the penny drops and then he turns. And we zoom and we focus. I just love that moment.
I think that's a solid choice, because that's because when you're explaining it as well, the shot choice, how much rehearsal and how much like discussions do you have with your team on that? Because I can imagine that it sounds like a really complicated shot and it's very technical.
It is a little bit, yeah. I guess it's a bit fiddly, but you know, you have to know that you've got. So you know, we knew that all the way back in soft prep that we wanted to do that shot, because that's in that week where I'm soft prepping with Carl and I'm exploring, you know, there were some key shots that's like, this is a shot we want. And so, you know, other examples might be, you know, like at the beginning, you know, zooming into Taylor's face at the beginning of the film, you know, where you got the main kind of title, that was always planned. Or, you know, like this long zoom out from Dee's face when he comes back from the hospital, he sits on the wing and you just do this long zoom out, you know, stuff like that is always planned. And in terms of the set, you build it with these things in mind, so we had certain camera traps. There was another camera trap by the top bunk that we could kind of take out and shoot through. And so I guess the answer is you don't have a lot of rehearsal time, but you know that certain key things are coming, and you plan around it and you build around it, and you make sure, while the week they're building the set, you go out, with your little app on your phone that shows you what the camera's going to see, and you make sure that the camera trap, I'm there while they're cutting the traps, making sure they cut them in the right place for the shot we want. I remember there was a whole conversation about, should we cut the camera trap higher compared to the toilet lower, and if it's too low, you're shooting up and you're not going to be able to see the food, so it's like you got to shoot it so that when he comes up from the toilet, you can shoot through him to the food. So maybe it's got to be higher than you. So it's just stuff like that, but no, so you don't have a lot of rehearsal time. You just make sure that you plan for it.
Yeah, well, again, have to nail it, and hats off to you and your team for doing it, because it looks incredible. And for my final question, is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you want to talk about, or is there a question that you want to ask me about the film?
I guess something worth mentioning is the aspect ratio. So we shot in the 3:2 aspect ratio, or otherwise known as 1.5:1, which is actually really common in a photograph because it's the aspect ratio of a normal photograph. Think 6:4, 8:10. It's been the normal aspect ratio for 35mm photograph like forever. But for some reason, it's not really used in cinema. Now it's started because it's associated with VistaVision, because obviously VistaVision runs, for the cinematography geeks who are listening, VistaVision runs 35mm horizontally. So obviously it has the same aspect ratio as a photograph, which runs horizontally, whereas film runs vertically. But now some things like Begonia, some VistaVision adjacent things are starting to be 1.5:1. But at the time that we were shooting, we couldn't find any English language film that had been done. So, we had to get on a call with Lionsgate and explain why we wanted this weird ratio, and, to Lionsgate's credit and Thea's credit for kind of letting us do it. I think it really works because and lots of people have kind of noticed it. Actually, it's it gives you the claustrophobia, which something like 185 or 166 wouldn't give you. However, it's not as self-consciously like arty as 4:3 would be. So it's somewhere in the middle, and I really love the impact of it in the cinema. It's a small decision, but it's one that I think was really kind of spot on. And yeah, what else? I just want to shout my focus putter Anil, who was just amazing. Yeah, not a lot of rehearsal. He couldn't even be in the cell because there was no space. So yeah, he did a great job. I think that's it.
No, again, I always like asking that question just because there's so much going through my mind. It's like, hopefully I haven't missed anything, but I'm glad that there's something to just tidy it up. And then yeah, it's interesting, even that, like having the call with Lionsgate. I bet you people just like, you need to walk me through this baby steps to understand why you want to do it. Why can't we just do it as normal?
Well, no, it's about how it's presented in the cinemas. I think their point, which is very valid, is we don't want it to feel like the edges are cut off or feel small. We want it to be a big film in the cinema, and I've completely heard that. And kind of Cal and I kind of walked through why we thought it was the correct choice. They saw it, they went with it, and I think it was the right call.
Yeah, and again, it looks incredible. Lorenzo, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Great to chat.
Wasteman is out now on VOD. I think it might still be in cinemas in America, but
yeah, if you're in the US, go hit up your local cinema.
Yeah, and if not, then yeah, watch on VOD. Yeah, thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.